The rain didn't wait for her tears. It fell harder, washing the dust from her bare feet as two men dragged her through the airport gates. "Please, Appa, don't do this." Her father didn't look back. The envelope of cash in his trembling hand said everything his mouth couldn't. 18, and already sold. She stared at the one waiting for her, a tall man in a black suit, expression unreadable, his umbrella perfectly still beneath the storm. The tattoo peeking from his neck told her who he was, long before his cold voice confirmed it. "You'll come with me." She expected a cell, a chain, maybe worse. But that night, in a mansion lit by silence, the man she feared most handed her a book. "Read," he said, and as her voice broke through the quiet, she never realized he was listening like it was the only thing keeping him alive. If this hooks you already, please grab a popcorn, sit back and wait to enjoy the full story. Ensure you like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories from our channel. The slap landed before the breath left her. He hit the woman who made her meals and mended her shirts, the woman who smelled of faint perfume and kerosene, and the girl's knees refused their weight as she lunged to catch her. "Appa, stop!" she shouted, voice raw with panic. Her father's face was a map of debts, black at the eyes, hollow at the cheeks, lips split from too much anger and too little sleep. He pushed the envelope across the table with the careless violence of a man who'd already sold everything else. "Sign this," he said, and it sounded like a sentence, not a plea. It's the only way to keep her alive. She read the paper as if the ink might bite. A contract, a name missing, a place stamped soul. The words swam. 18. Sold to clear a debt. Married to a man whose name they whispered like a curse. Her mother coughed into her sleeve. The cough rattled like thin bones. "I'll work," the girl said. "I'll—" Her father laughed, a sound brittle as glass. "You working will feed her? You'll be married to a man who has no home for pity." He shoved the pen toward her, eyes that had once promised protection now only promising ruin. "Sign. Do it for her." She signed because the house smelled of vinegar and fear. She signed because her mother's fingers braided into hers like roots clinging to soil, because the doctor's face had been a closed door that morning, and because Appa's temper had a history that taught her to obey when the world demanded sacrifice. 2 days later, she stood barefoot in an airport that smelled like other people's returns. Men in suits shadowed her father's suit like wolves around a fresh kill. They didn't speak to her, not with words. Their silence said what the envelope could not. "You are property now." Her breath trembled into a prayer she did not know how to finish. The plane took her across oceans and language and shame. She pressed her forehead to the cold window and watched the patchwork of clouds swallow the map of everything she'd known. She imagined shackles, chains, the distant wails of other girls who had been sold and never returned. She imagined pain wearing her face. At the airport in Seoul, a man waited beneath a black umbrella while a drizzle stitched the night. He did not approach with the swagger of a predator. He stood like a statue left on a stoop, quiet, precise, the collar of his coat crisp as if he were carved from paper. He was older, scars clubbed his jaw, and his eyes were the color of storm sea glass. For a moment, she thought of the men who had taken rent and respect in her village, the men who spat curses and counted teeth. She gripped her bag like it was a life preserver. He didn't touch her. He only watched, and when he lifted his hand, his voice was low and simple. "This way." Inside his car, the world smelled different. Coffee and old paper, and something warm that had nothing to do with violence. The house that folded around them was wide, miffed with light and softer than the concrete of the airport. He led her through rooms without asking questions she feared to answer. At the end of a long corridor, he opened a door and handed her a book. The cover was frayed, the pages yellowed like autumn leaves. He said, "Read." She expected a command. She expected mockery. What she did not expect was the way the silence leaned in to listen. She found a small chair and read aloud because her throat remembered words before it remembered defiance. The syllables trembled between them, and the man's eyes closed like someone listening to a prayer. When she stumbled on a line about mercy, he reached out and touched the page, a tremor running through his fingers that said he had not meant to be kind, and yet could not help himself.
Nights became ritual. She read and he listened, and the house learned the cadence of her voice. He taught her how to make tea that tasted like forgiveness, how to fold a shirt so it would not crease in grief. In the mornings he brought fruit, and in the afternoons, a quiet that felt like protection. He was always measured, never a caress that bruised, never a hand that hovered too long. When he spoke about business, his voice tightened into the authority that made men step carefully. When he spoke to her, it softened into something that felt like shelter. The news from home arrived in small, jagged letters. A debt collector had come by twice more. Appa had sold the old radio for medicine money that never made its way to the doctor. Her mother's cough turned into a fever that scraped the inside of her chest. The girl sent money in secret, folding the notes into letters like offerings. She lied and said the work would be slow, that it would take time to send enough. In her hands, the bills felt like cold promises. She watched the man who had bought her from the world watch the city from the window. He carried himself like someone who had learned control out of terror. Once, when rain hammered like fists against the glass, she asked, "Why did you buy me?" He did not answer right away. Silence sealed the room. When he finally spoke, his words were clipped and dry. "You were available." That answer should have stung like a whip, but there was an honesty to it that did not pretend. It was a fact. Later, when she caught him looking at her while she slept, he confessed in a voice that had the ache of someone naming a wound. "I did not plan kindness. I planned a solution. Life makes you pragmatic." She learned his name, Min-jae, little by little, like learning the beat of a new city. She learned that kindness could be deliberate. She learned his hands were capable of both violence and tenderness, and that the balance between them was a precarious thing. He let her keep her freedom in small ways. Her books stayed in her room. Her letters were not read aloud for entertainment. He asked for one small thing in return, her voice. "Read to me," he would say, and the request never sounded possessive, only like someone asking for a place to lay a tired head. When the winter came, the man's silence began to wait like a secret. She saw it in the way he sometimes fixed a photograph on the wall and then turned away. She saw it when he answered a phone with a name that did not belong to any friend, and then set it down as if the conversation had scraped his bones raw. Once, when she stumbled over a word, he chuckled softly and said, "You do not sound like the women who have been here before you." His laugh carried no cruelty, but a loneliness that matched the shape of her own. At home, Appa fell deeper into his own buying. The house became a ledger of small losses. The clock was pawned, the curtains sold, the pan that made porridge traded. She heard whispers from neighbors, how he had taken money owed by others and used it to fuel his drink, how he had promised to marry her off to stop the debt collectors, and then signed away any shame with hands that used to cradle her. One night, a neighbor's child, brazen and cruel with the truth only children could wield, said, "Your father sold you like cassava." The word cut like a stone. When she told Min-jae, he listened as if the information were a map to a new threat. "He did what he thought would keep you alive," Min-jae said, voice steady. "But that does not excuse him." Bitterness swelled in her like a second pulse. She thought of the fevered nights and Appa's laugh that had nothing gentle inside it. She thought of the way her mother had tried to hide bruises beneath woven scarves, as if fabric could bury an assault.
The urge to break everything rose in her until it was a fever she could not name. Revenge came like a plan, or like prayer. It depended on when she said it aloud. She began to watch Min-jae in a new light. What if his resources were a door she could push through? What if she could use his power to retrieve the small things her father had taken, the money, the dignity, the right to look Appa in the face and say, "I am not for sale"? It sounded monstrous to think of love as a ladder. It sounded like salvation to imagine him as a weapon. One night, after she had read until the moon wore thin, she closed the book and asked, "If someone has the power to take what they want, to hurt the people who hurt us, would you use that power on them?" Min-jae's jaw clenched. He looked at her like one might look at a river about to change course. "We do what we must," he said, "but violence changes nothing about the hurt inside." She realized then that if she chose to wield him as a tool, she would be learning the shape of the same cruelty that had raised her, using others' pain as currency. The thought made her stomach hollow. She forced herself to breathe, and she told herself she would be smarter. She would avenge without becoming the thing she despised. The decision did not feel like a clean line. It felt like stepping onto a path that might swallow both kinds of salvation. The one that would heal her mother, and the one that might hollow her own heart. She folded the book under her arm and listened to the slow clock as if time could answer a moral question. Min-jae watched her, the corners of his mouth going small in a way that might have been a worried smile. "You are thinking of home," he said. She nodded. The plan had already lodged in her like a seed. She would learn him, win him, and then use the power that protected her to set things right. She would not become her father. She would become better. The thought reassured her for one quick breath before the night swallowed it and left her alone with a terrible, blooming hope.
But what she didn't know was that the man who listened to her voice every night was hiding a truth darker than the storm she arrived in. A truth her father sold her to silence. A truth powerful enough to destroy everything she had left, including the fragile safety she'd finally found in his home. Because somewhere in that mansion, behind a locked door no one entered, lay the one secret that connected her past to his. And the moment she discovered it, nothing, not love, not fear, not even fate, would ever be the same again. If you want to know what happens next, if you want to see what that secret reveals, hit the like button, subscribe to Tales Haven Stories today,